So let's talk about waves, which is another word that's going to come up. Some people call it energy. Then energy becomes emotion. Emotion becomes information. So some people are in the energy. They have like so much energy and then so much emotion. And then some people are already receiving information. So I don't know where you're at, but you're somewhere there. It could be all. Waves are interesting, and they don't normally come up because the system of interpretation of the mind tries to humanize things, usually. Waves aren't just sounds. So sometimes people are laying down. They're not experiencing personal or emotional things. They're just seeing shapes and lights and energy, and they complain. It's like, why am I not seeing my past? Or who am I? That's you. Your vibrations, your waves. But you're trying to humanize. You're trying to start with what you know. But that's you too. And when you look at the waves long enough, they will mean something. So sometimes you're going to see a color. Sometimes you're going to... that's a frequency too. So there's going to be weird mathematical algorithmic things. You don't need to understand that so much, but it's still working out. You still have this autonomic intelligence where you don't plan your day, but then you're made of trillions of cells, hundreds of billions of neurons, not hundreds, but billions of neurons. God knows how many viruses and enzymes. Something's got to be managing that. Something's got to be informed. Otherwise, you'd be crawling like a snake or like walking like a dinosaur. Not that they're actually less intelligent, but something's directing you that's really smart. So somehow you're catching up with this. So vibration could be a choice on a starting point. You want to change the world? Start with a vibration. And you can do that through your sensitivity. You walk into a room. I'm not vibing. I'm not feeling it. Maybe my mind doesn't connect the dots, but my body knows something is off, something is on. And I think people are just learning to listen rather than just basing it on what the schools and what other supposed sources of information put in. So I think one of the basic sciences that's building a bridge in terms of the work that we do and in the sciences would be entrainment. A lot of people are talking about brainwave entrainment. That what is happening outside is somehow influencing what's happening inside. Like food can entrain people. But when you hear this, like entrainment, what you normally hear is brainwave entrainment. And we can experiment with some of that today. So it's actually interesting that this is a new science. To a lot of you, it wouldn't seem so exciting because it seems so basic. Yeah, of course, what happens outside will affect what's happening inside. But entrainment as a science is new. So especially brainwave entrainment. But when you study inner dance, it's not just about brainwave entrainment. A lot of the experiences are not just about the brain that we're watching around the world. It's actually about the heart. The heart is holding a lot of information. And we think it's just the heartbeat. But the rhythm or the waves of the heart decides on fear or trust. Do I open or do I close? So a lot of people are thinking through the heart. So if you know how to touch people's hearts, anything is possible. The Steve Jobs who said that, by the way. He invented the iPod. 1,000 songs in your pocket. We're finding out that there are certain conditions where you can touch people's hearts more. When you bring people into the horizontal, the heart becomes more sensitive. And when you change the heartbeat, the brain wave will get entrained. So you don't want to localize your studies on just the brain. The brain is being coordinated with the other functions. So now, the basal ganglia is your animal brain. I've watched so many human beings become like animals. They would crawl on the ground like growling. And it's funny sometimes some of them are like so primitive, and then they stand up and say, okay, I'm late for a meeting, I gotta go. It's so instant that we can go into the snake, the serpent, the dinosaur, the lion, the beast. It seemed to have just been waiting. I borrowed your speaker, by the way. Thank you. And what is responsible for that is the basal ganglia. That is the old brain. And the basal ganglia is easily triggered by music. So the basal ganglia is very entrainable by rhythm.
Is at the back of the head?
Yeah, at the more, let's say, more at in the middle bottom. When you say the back, that would be the occipital lobe. So if we're more careful, it would be more in the midbrain, next to the brain stem. So sometimes when you're called to go here, that's the old brain. That's the animal brain. If you want to access the new brain, then that's the cortex. The cortex is just the gray matter that surrounds this whole thing, that maps out. Now we're talking about it. Motor functions, speech. Speech is in the left. If you're left-handed, speech would be in the right. Is anyone left-handed here? So then, if you're working with a left-handed person, their language is in the right. Take note of that. There's always contralateral positioning. So when you put a speaker on someone's right, it actually gets measured in the left auditory cortex. When you extend someone's right arm, you are activating their left brain. This is the masculine. You want to open the masculine, you work in the right part. You want to work on this part, you work in the opposite. It's contralateral. Same with the eyes. You want them to see something, and you know, or even just positioning the head. There's actually head direction cells in your cortex. So how you shape the energy has so much to do with all these positioning techniques. That's called proprioception. It's a sense. But not to go too far into these, start with the basal ganglia. So many reasons why you are addicted, why you're attracted, why your personality is a certain way, why your body moves a certain way. It's because of your animal brain, your instinctive brain. The basal ganglia makes decisions for you on whether to stimulate or to inhibit. And from there, you send out dopamine, glutamate, and GABA. These are the on-off switches. So if you know how to use certain stimuli, you can do that. Okay? So rhythm is about speed. There's that rhythm, and then there's that rhythm. So you want to know how certain rhythms create certain moods, certain conditions, and then you can mix rhythms together. The more, the better. Sometimes. Okay, so this is a really simple set of slides. Basic waveforms. Okay. Make sure Ableton's working. So Korg. I'm just going to pull something up that helps us to see the sound.
So you're saying the more the better mixed together?
Yes.
Is that because people can't think anymore?
No, it's because the brain originally actually had all of the waves. And when we got modernized, when we developed personalities, we there's something that begins to happen at the age of 2 or 3 where you need to give up a lot of the connections. It's called pruning, neural pruning, because you can't have that much. You can't just be cosmic and you can't just be a baby. So every time, let's say you move an arm and then you move it again and you move it again, you create a wiring. And then you strengthen that wiring, that would become you. So then we would limit the waves so that we can build attention. The more you are holding too many waves, you get ADHD or ADD. You can't pay attention so much. So the more certain waves are too much alive or present in your system, you can't pay attention. You won't do well in school. People can't talk to you. So to give you some specifics, for example, like alpha brain activity, alpha waves happen more in the right side, and when that starts to go too much here, then beta consciousness is where you're really focused. That's supposed to be when you're working hard or sometimes stressed out. That belongs to the left brain. But then when that starts to spill over into the right brain, some weird things begin to happen. Theta wave as well, it happens usually in the right side of the brain, which is the feminine side. So when theta starts to appear here, you start to lose focus. But here's what's interesting. In babies and small children, theta is spread across the whole brain. But when you grow up, theta stops showing up here when you're awake. The only time that starts to show up is when you start to get sleepy. And then theta starts to come up. So you're actually programmed by these waves. You see what I'm getting at? If you know how to entrain people according to a mixture of the waves, but we want to honor that we can stay focused right now because I'm right now limiting my theta waves. Like delta waves only show up during slow wave sleep. That's when it spreads. So I need to suppress my delta waves right now in order to be able to sit here and talk to you. If I did that to my delta waves, I would trance out and I couldn't be in language in some ways.
Sorry, quick, like the big Josh playlist that you created, was that then,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of
Delta, theta, gamma, mu, and high oscillating frequencies. A lot of music that's like party based, that's called this is called a beat or an event. So you can measure this if there's regularity. There's a range that a human being would recognize so that that's music. But if I make that slow enough and there's gaps between the events, that for you is not music. So you would measure that by beats per minute or hertz. A hertz is how many cycles per second. So 1 hertz would be 1 cycle per second. And that's what they use to measure a brain wave. That's what they use to measure frequency. So there are correlations between the normal heart rate and perceivable music. And I find that interesting. That the average rate of the heartbeat is actually the recognizable range of music. You go beyond that, it's too much already. Hertz and cycles. It's recording. So it seems like human beings and organisms had to create these waves in order to organize and manage ourselves. And now we have landed on something stable, but if you're in this work, you're actually breaking something old. There are human beings that are experimenting with ranges beyond what was deemed normal. So there's music that's recognizing BPM, that's bringing hertz neural oscillations into different territory. So that is the reason why it would be interesting for us to look at like waveforms. So let's start with the basic one, the sine wave. And then we can look for sine waves in any of these machines. Sine wave is the simplest frequency because there's only one. There's the fundamental. A fundamental is, let's say, the note that you can sing. A lot of you probably have some music or enough music where you where you know C, you know D, you know E. So sine wave is when you simplify the wave, take out the harmonics and the inharmonics, so there's only one tone. But this is interesting because it doesn't actually seem to exist in nature. There is no sinusoidal waves in nature that's a pure tone. That when you study the sounds in nature and when you study the brain, when you study sound, it's a simulation. We can make it in music using instruments and using these machines, but they don't actually exist. It's what you call a platonic ideal. Exists somewhere there in a dream space, but that pure tone doesn't exist. Every sound that you hear is a mixture of harmonic and inharmonic overtones. There is a reason why you would want to use it in music, though, because it's represented in some ways. So I think this one could help us look into it. Let's look for these are different waveforms. So you can manipulate waves without even touching them. So it doesn't mean anything if you can't see it right now. It means something through your listening, and I think it would help to look at it. Is there like a shape, right? And it helps us to see the shape. This is not the shape, this is the spectrum. So the lower bass notes would be in the left, the higher notes would be in the right. So if I change the notes, you can see it goes higher and goes lower. And then the height, so you're learning how to look at a spectrogram is the elevation would be the amplitude. So the louder it is, the higher it goes. So musicians use these devices to see how do I come down when there's more than one wave. So this is a oscilloscope. So that's the shape of the sound right now. That's the shape of that. Okay, so it's a little bit like a sine wave. This is a sine. So the sound has a shape. Okay, so let's look for a sine wave. what you get is silence. Borrow a body. We'll borrow your brain. Your head should be near this brain. Yes, please. Okay. Maybe a little bit closer to there so that she has access here. Yes. So this is an exercise you've never done. Close your eyes. And we're interested in people seeing the nature of the wave. And we can take her through different and you can just, if you're interested in what the shaping looks like, depending on what the sharing will be later. like to come back here from there. Observe. What's it like from waves to body? Thank you. Okay. You could go back to your place so you could tell us all about it. Welcome back. Okay, maybe you could go back to your place so we could all see. So you could see us when you put that back on. Okay, so you could share what you can.
It will be non-linear. There are moments of ease in the body, and the body is moving towards the sound and wanting to dance with it. And yielding into the touch and support available opens up more pathways. And it's playful. And then I hear the invitation that there's so much more space available. What's space behind me? And something shifts, and it's like an experience of rebirth, and my eyes become like fire, and I see the creation and destruction of myself and recreation of myself, and I have images of being embryonic and then being born, and there's a huge amount of energy that starts to be on, and it's very much around the fingers at first, and it starts to move up through me, and my breathing is energized, and it's happening. At the beginning there was more consciousness and unconscious together, that sacred marriage of the two, and then the process happens, and then I'm in it, I'm with it, and it needs to move through. Can't stop it, wouldn't want to. And there's that shift and acceleration within that. And then very futile, and then again the sense of integrating the learning of this morning, the sense of growing up and being able to make meaning, and even just coming up into spine and sitting up, and how to grow up through this experience. Yeah, so many ages. Wow.
Thank you. This is the first opening or inviting. There's a lot that's being demonstrated. So beginning with the music part, what is composing is not the musician, it's the body and what's in the body. So when we talk about music, we're only partially interested in the production of it. We're interested in how is it being received. So then when some of these are created on the spot, it's because it's the energy itself is doing it. So synchronization is a word that I would use. You used another word, but this is basically what we're working on. That, what is outside is learning how to synchronize with what is inside. So there's a listening process. It's not happening just with the ears and the auditory cortex. It's a feedback loop where how can the whole thing become one? How can the whole thing become one? So when we look at waveforms, going back to this, this is a simulation, as we're pointing out. And then when you look at the other waves, whether it be the triangle wave, without going too much into the mechanics of this, that these are the shapes that we were partly seeing, the saw waves, the square, we saw the square today, the triangle. These are basically combinations of sine waves, so that when you bring pure waves together, they start to assume these shapes. So what these are demonstrating is basically when your brain, or when the instrument, which is another brain, combines different waves together, you create a shape. And sometimes there's going to be shapes within smaller shapes within bigger shapes. So when you study the brain waves, a lot of them are actually shaped like square waves, or saw waves, or triangle waves. The value that I'm imparting with you is when a lot of you are facilitating the process, you start simple, and then it rises up. There's so much potency in watching this, because this doesn't seem like music. And when people are laying down, there's actually a temptation to give people what is being asked for. Need to plug.